Welcome to Royal News Updates.
OMG. Piers Morgan. I didn't think Harry could go lower than trashing his grandmother as she mourns Prince Philip, but the spineless self-pitying twerp's attack on free speech makes him look bonkers, not the US Constitution. Before we start, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon, thanks. If the freedom of speech is taken away, said America's first president George Washington, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to the slaughter. His view was shared by Thomas Jefferson, a fellow founding father and America's third president, who declared, "Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost." These two men helped create the initial United States Constitution and subsequent Bill of Rights that included the First Amendment, which was specifically designed to protect the very freedoms they were referring to. That amendment states, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." They are arguably the most important words in the entire Constitution and have afforded Americans, and American journalists, the most powerful protection for their rights to freedom of speech and expression of any country in the world. The First Amendment is one of the things I most admire about the United States, especially coming from a country like Britain where free speech for journalists like me is now heavily regulated. But not everyone shares my admiration. In fact, Prince Harry has just declared the First Amendment to be bonkers. His extraordinary outburst came during an interview he conducted with actor Dax Shepard for the Armchair Expert podcast, during which he also launched a shameful new attack on his family. "I've got so much I want to say about the First Amendment as I sort of understand it," he said, "but it is bonkers. I don't want to start going down the First Amendment route because that's a huge subject and one which I don't understand because I've only been here a short time, but you can find a loophole in anything. You can capitalize or exploit what's not said rather than uphold what is said." Like so much of the absurd Meghan-inspired psychobabble that spews out of his mouth, none of this makes any sense, and he clearly doesn't understand what he's saying either. Though we can safely assume that he just hates anything which affords any protection to journalists to say things he doesn't like, because that has been a familiar theme from the indignant media loathing Prince for the last few years. It's the same mindset that makes Meghan think she can complain to the bosses of TV networks when presenters like me refuse to believe her lies, and have them removed from their jobs if we don't apologize for our impertinence. But all that Americans will take away from Harry's outburst about the First Amendment is a posh, privileged British royal slamming their constitution and their unalienable rights to freedom of speech and expression. It takes an extraordinary amount of entitled arrogance to mock the most revered building block of your adopted country's history. And lest we forget, things didn't end well for the last British royal who tried to tell Americans how to lead their lives, George III. Bashing the US Constitution is very dangerous territory for any British royal to meddle in, but Harry seems beyond caring about the impact of his ignorant and deluded words, and oblivious to his rank hypocrisy. He professes to care about free speech, but like with so many of his statements, his actions suggest the complete opposite. Harry was the kind of person that Sir Winston Churchill was talking about when he said, "Everyone is in favor of free speech. Hardly a day passes without its being extolled. But some people's idea of it is that they are free to say what they like, but if anyone else says anything back, that is an outrage." It's the same double standard that we see behind Harry's claim to be a man of compassion. The word screams off the front page of Archewell, the foundation he and Meghan set up in their son Archie's name. Compassion in action, the title headline boasts. Through our non-profit work, as well as creative activations, we drive systemic cultural change across all communities, one act of compassion at a time. How touching. And barely a day goes by without the pair of these selfless charitable souls telling us how deeply compassionate they are. But they're not, are they? In fact, it's hard to imagine a less compassionate pair of ruthless, heartless, selfish, shameless little grifters than the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Meghan's disowned almost her entire family, including her father, Thomas. Just as she has tossed away anyone in her life, from her ex-husband to friends and work colleagues who've ceased to be of use to her on her frenzied scramble up the global celebrity ladder. And Harry's spent the past few weeks publicly trashing his family on any media outlet that will have him. I didn't think the world's most spoiled brats could plunge any lower than their 2-hour Oprah wine-a-thon in which they branded the royals a bunch of horrible uncaring racists without producing a shred of evidence to support their claims, and bitterly attacked the institution of the monarchy whilst continuing to trade off their royal titles to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. But Harry's new orgy of unsavory self-indulgent podcast tripon was even worse. The Prince of Compassion used his latest interview. He gives a lot of interviews for a guy who quit Britain to safeguard his privacy, doesn't he? To launch an astonishing rant about the terrible, genetic paean he claims to have suffered at the hands of his awful father, and then said that Prince Charles has only been such a bad parent because he himself had been treated just as badly by his parents, the Queen and Prince Philip. I don't think we should be pointing the finger or blaming anybody, Harry began, before immediately pointing the finger and blaming people. But certainly when it comes to parenting, if I've experienced some form of pain or suffering because of the pain or suffering that perhaps my father or my parents had suffered, I'm going to make sure I break that cycle so that I don't pass it on, basically. It's a lot of genetic pain and suffering that gets passed on. I started to piece it together and go, okay, so this is where he went to school, this is what happened, I know this about his life, I also know that is connected to his parents, so that means he's treated me the way he was treated, so how can I change that for my own kids? It's shameful enough that Harry is once again publicly hammering his father in public like this, just as he did to Oprah when he sounded like a petulant teenager as he berated Charles for cutting him off financially and not taking his calls. But for him to implicitly criticize the Queen and Prince Philip for the genetic pain and suffering they supposedly inflicted on Charles, which then got inflicted on him, is beneath contempt. Does it get any less compassionate, or more disgusting than condemning your grandparents just weeks after one of them died? Or, any more reprehensible than to compound the mourning queen's misery by making her feel even worse? How terribly hurt she must have felt when she heard what her grandson had said about her. It takes a rare degree of self-obsessed, uncaring narcissism to do that to a grieving woman of 95. Yet the most shocking about Harry's outburst is that it wasn't really shocking at all. The guy's hit the self-destruct button and is now unraveling before our eyes. The only remaining question, as the front page of the Daily Mail asked last week, is, how low will Harry go? I fear the answer is a lot lower. After all, the only currency and relevance he has left is exploiting his royal status, and he has to give his lucrative new paymasters at Spotify and Netflix their money's worth. The British public has grown increasingly angry at Harry's behavior, as can be seen in recent polls showing support for him and his grasping wife plummeting to record negative depths. And now the American public is turning on him too, incensed that he is belittling their right to free speech whilst reserving the right to spew off about anything he likes. But I doubt he either comprehends the damage he is doing, or cares. Like his equally shameless and hypocritical wife, all Harry seems to worry about is promoting himself and making as much money as he can from the royal status that he pretends to hate but loves to commercialize. The double standard of this position is so staggering, it's little wonder that furious palace officials are now clamoring for the Sussexes to voluntarily stop using their royal titles. But they won't, obviously, because without them they become just another celebrity couple on the make in California, only without any discernible talent. As I wrote when they announced in January 2020 that they were quitting Britain and royal duty, Queen should have stripped them of the titles then and there. She didn't because Harry's her beloved grandson and she doesn't want to be seen to mistreat him. Today, the case for cutting him off from his royal status is even stronger, yet I suspect the Queen is still resisting all calls to do so, because she is an inherently decent woman and has a far greater loyalty to her family than Harry is showing. However, we've surely reached the point where she has to put the future of monarchy before a couple of renegades way down the succession food chain who are intent on wrecking it. On the Archewell website, the Sussexes claim they are serving the monarchy, honoring the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, insist they deeply believe in the role of the monarchy and their commitment to Her Majesty, and vow their roles will continue to reflect their sense of duty and allegiance to the monarch. Sadly, as we can all see, this is complete bullshit*T. With every word that now comes from his increasingly cruel mouth, Harry does more damage to the reputation of not just the royal family but the institution they serve. The Queen is the head of that institution and its greatest protector. Her grandson's gone rogue and seems intent on destroying everything she's worked so hard to preserve. It's time she showed him that the monarchy is bigger than his pathetically bruised, fragile and victimhood-dominated ego and rendered him and Meghan plain title-less civilians. As for Harry, if I were Prince Charles, then I'd be tempted to borrow the words of Rocky Balboa when his son began behaving like this. "Let me tell you something you already know," Rocky said. "The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you are hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you're got to be willing to take the hits, and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him, or her, or anybody. Cowards do that." Exactly. Harry's gone from being a courageous war hero to a spineless whiny crybaby who blames his family for all his supposed woes and who, like his wife, shamelessly and cynically weaponizes issues like mental health and racism to silence critics. Neither he nor Meghan shows an ounce of the compassion they love to preach about to those closest to them. Nor do they seem to appreciate just how chronically unself-aware they sound, constantly bleating about their poor oppressed lives from the comfort of their $11 million Californian mansion, while much of the world reels from a deadly pandemic. Harry has lost his country, his dignity, and now seems to be losing his mind too, as he condemns everything from his grieving grandmother to free speech. It's time his royal hypocrite stopped abusing his family, stopped moaning about everything all the bloody time, stopped exploiting his royal titles for huge financial gain, stopped trashing America's Constitution, and grew a pair. Please share your thoughts in the comment. Thanks.